So I've put a big disclaimer slide to start with because I just thought that I'll pick up some of the best of the internet, right, on content marketing, some really big people and companies, and what they kind of presented. And I went through SlideShare because I thought these people articulate what we do very well. So the companies that you will see out here, where I've got information from, are Newscred, Contently. There's a gentleman called Joe Polizzi, who I really think is like the godfather of content marketing. And Smart Insights is a very interesting graph that you will see from Smart Insights out there, right? Of course, there is a little bit of scatter, and I've taken the liberty of using some of our material so that it kind of benefits you. The other thing is, I'm going to talk about content marketing over the next 28, 29 minutes. But what I really want to do is I don't want to give you, definitions. You can find them on the internet. I'm actually going to give you what is presented to clients and a better understanding of what this is about. So there aren't any definitions. It's a more real world thing. It's more about, like I said, picking up some of the best pieces from the web, right? So when content marketing started, it started off with the whole idea of brands becoming publishers. There was a direct interaction possible between consumers and brands. Previously, consumers would have direct interaction with the brands only through brochures or through, when you went to the car showroom, you'd see something. When you went to Asian Paints to kind of get your house painted, then they'd have this paint shades and things like that. But all the other communication that would happen, the awareness building and everything would happen on the back of third-party media, like outdoor hoarding, like newspapers, like radio, like television. But the internet allowed brands and consumers to have like a great kind of one-on-one conversation. And therefore, publishers had to kind of change gears. They had to complement their advertising. They had to compete with the advertising. They had to complement their advertising. And they had to start becoming more like publishers, because no longer was a site about, about what the brand was, but it was really where they had to start wearing this hat and see what the consumer wanted as information, and make sure that that website or that platform that they are present on, make sure that it meets that need. So, right. So earlier there was the whole thing saying that, we want to kind of become publishers. And I think over a period of time, content marketing has evolved. And while that was good in the early days of content marketing, and in the early days when there was a direct consumer, and when there was an early, actually not direct, but the early direct consumer brand conversation, thinking of yourself as a publisher was pretty cool, and it was in fashion at that time. But the reality today is, it isn't really, your content marketing just doesn't make you a publisher. Your publishing has to generate a business result. It has to capture enough audience interest. It has to educate the audience to a large extent. It has to gradually pull the audience down so that, the audience eventually makes a purchase or considers a purchase or refers this as a purchase, right? So the end action really was business action. And this slide from Newscred actually says it really well. It says that the goal, is not, nobody's asking you to, the goal is not great content. Great content is the means to eventually getting business done, right? So eventually every business has a business goal, a marketing goal. And that goal is what we need to kind of meet. You will use great content to meet that goal, but don't stop at that great content or believing that is great content and say, yes, I've achieved what I have to achieve with content marketing. That's not true. So it's a means to the end, and it really isn't the end per se, right? And I think all of this becomes even more important when I start looking at, in the recent past, there's this whole debate about online advertising and how it kind of works. And, there's this whole conversation about, how ads are being better targeted. And even unfortunately, let's say that I book a ticket to Goa, and I book a ticket and I get my ticket on Gmail. The reality, and I book it through ClearTrip, okay, but the reality is even 10 days after I book that ticket, Google will play me that same ad, even though it has gone on Gmail. And and Google will send me this notification saying that, my flight is in 2 days, or my flight is today, and it'll then integrate the map and everything. But despite that, I will still get, tickets to Goa advertising. Now, whether that is Google, whether that is ClearTrip, but clearly there's a gap somewhere. And I think over a period of time, advertising will need to be kind of rethought when it comes to the internet. So some research like this, where, when you look at it, out of every 100 impressions that were there, just 54 were viewable, because before that ad perhaps loaded, the consumer moved down the scroll or kept moving down. Just think about your mobile and the speed that you're kind of, flicking your finger up, and therefore viewability really becomes an issue. And out of the 54 which are potentially viewable, 35 got viewed. And 9 is where there was a stay of over a second, right? And that kind of tells you how content can be better deployed, how content can work better. And I'll go out and I'll say this, that it works even better than advertising online. I'm not saying that advertising doesn't work. I'm talking about what works better and what has a greater potential as we kind of go ahead. And when you look at content, right, I think there's this whole thing about storytelling, and it's really important that we kind of weave in the right kind of story. So an insurance company can really talk about, about their product in the way that we are an insurance company. This is what happens to you, and now that you're getting married, or now that you've had a child, you need to get yourself better insured, and these are my product features, right? Or that company has the opportunity to go out and talk about the same thing in a different format, which says a letter from a, from a father to a son, right? And then explains that this father is 63 years old or 65 years old, and his son is now getting a son, and how it's important to kind of invest. And then therefore you're passing that message through, but I think you're passing that message through in a very strong way, in a way that kind of connects with emotions, in a way that kind of talks um, about, it not really talks about, which really leverages the power of storytelling. So I think that's really important, that you will notice that, really, really good stories, and there are tons of these stories that you will see online. There was um, Vix that did this transgender mother, which is such a beautiful story, right? It went on for about 4 minutes. It ran on YouTube. And there are several such stories that are being told. There was the Kumbh Mela story that happened earlier, I think it was last year in March. And there are such several stories that are there. And stories can be told in many ways, right? They can be told across formats. So they're not necessarily only done on video. And I'll come to the formats piece in a bit. So net, it's important that you can create a lot of content, right? There's tons of content created. Like 5 or 6 years back, I remember the same newscred, right? We had a slide which said that, do you have any idea on the number of pieces of content generated every day? And it was 4.5 billion a day. And that's just insane amounts of content that the internet allows you to create, right? But it's important for you to have meaningful content, right? And what is meaningful content, right? Meaningful content is content that achieves a business goal, that achieves a marketing goal, right? And that becomes meaningful content. And it's extremely important for us to make sure that the story is told, that the idea is not that you tell a beautiful story. We're not putting a child to sleep, you're getting a consumer to buy, and that really is important. And that can only be done if you've got content which is hardworking, which is smart working, and eventually which is more meaningful more than anything else. Because if you're not doing that, right, then you are actually bombarded with so many pieces of content. There's content that you instantly tune out of. There's content that you stay with, right? There's content that just doesn't appeal to you, like, and really that's why I think this slide is important, because it says that, meaningful content if that's not being created, if content is not being created to achieve a business result, if content is not a story well told, then it is just noise, right? And I think noise is a lot more easier to create. It's the harder part of it is actually creating good and powerful content. Uh, there are many things. This is an interesting slide by Joe Pulizzi. So, if you actually look at companies, right, they have probably websites that were done ages ago. They're horrible. They're terrible. They're websites that are neglected. The biggest, people get excited and say, "Ki, I'm going to start blogging." And what happens is the problem with all of this is the ball drops very easily here. I wanted to look at content marketing like this, right? Content marketing will not give you an early, it does not give you like an early result. It takes time to get a content. So imagine it to be very similar to kind of building your body, right? To get your body in shape or to remain fit. So, let's assume I'm unfit and I want to kind of get fit and things of that sort. I can't go and, run for 10 days and do some exercise for 10 days and then imagine changes to happen in my body. It's a very gradual process, right? You can't say that I'm going to save for 6 months and I'm going to become a millionaire. No, that thing starts developing and then your investments grow, and then the money that is grown on your investments grows further and further and further. And then suddenly, so a tree becomes a plant. Sorry, a plant becomes a tree, right? After a certain point of time. The most important thing about content, right, is consistency. You need to make sure that you publish consistently over a period of time. I'm glad you're doing this webinar. You will see that, today, if you have X number of people, right, 1.5 years from now, and if you consistently make sure that you publish good content, get great speakers, 1.5 years from now, you'll have 10x that number, you'll have 15x that number, right? And it will grow. And therefore, that's where it is. But while you're kind of planning this webinar, and I'm giving you a sense of what you're doing, Anirudh, and, guys, is that you also need to know, why am I doing it? What kind of content am I asking for? Why will this fit the larger need, right? How is this kind of going to be different from what I'm doing elsewhere? Are you also just doing a webinar like somebody else does a webinar? Are you kind of building on that webinar? Are you doing a little more? And I think those are the kind of things that you need to, eventually define. So when does content marketing fail? When does it go into the dustbin of life? It goes in um, when we are not patient. Like I gave you the example on your, building a great body, and I gave you the other example of, saving money and investing money and growing your money, right? When there's no value, when you just kind of say something because, you have to say it, when it's a product conversation more than a storytelling conversation. When you create this content, do you really believe that this is kind of, you don't have to be different for the heck of being different, right? But you need to kind of find out whether you think this content stands out, whether this is really good, right? You need to make sure that the one big tip that Joe Pulizzi gives, he says you pick a time in a day and you make sure that that time and that day is when you will consistently publish content. And trust me, that really works, right? Most of these things don't work there. And finally, why am I doing this? What is the strategy? In fact, if you go up the internet and you look at documented content marketing strategy, you'll find some great content. You'll find some great reasons, right? For you to, you'll find some great reasons. You'll find some great reasons to have this content marketing strategy. You'll also find the tenets of that whole content marketing strategy. And I'd urge you students to kind of go there and kind of take a look at it, or students just started a business, whatever kind of stage in life you are, just starting off with content marketing. Some of the guys who've done it really well, and I know this is a Ghisapeta example that is there, but the reality is that, when I look at the fantastic stuff that Red Bull is doing, you'll be surprised to know that what I heard in the content marketing conferences that I've been to, right, is that the Red Bull media company actually now makes more money than the Red Bull drink itself, right? And there's a funny way that kind of content pays off. There's another example. It's Tasty. So if you guys go and type Tasty on Facebook, they kind of started on social, and they started by, making recipes under a minute. This is how they started. They're today doing a lot more forms of content, longer forms of content, etc. But they started these 1 minute recipes. It was really, really quick, snazzy, fast videos, really close-up shots of food. Food, when you do close-up shots, looks a lot more sexier, looks a lot more cooler, looks a lot more appetizing, right? And they kind of made these easy, fast recipes in under a minute. And it is a BuzzFeed initiative, right? And then as they kind of grew their audience, and this isn't recent, this is more than 4 years back, as they kind of grew that audience, they then, did their first way of monetizing it. And then they, off advertising, monetizing, right? And then they built out this book, which they custom printed for audiences, right? And they sold lakhs. This is an old number. They've sold like a lot more. In fact, Tasty is so cool that today when you kind of go to Tasty, they've like launched a smart cooker, they've launched an induction bit, and they have actually used content to launch, or to extend, or that content gave them that opportunity, that consistency, the beauty of that content, the way they told that story, right? They told that story well. Obviously, they weren't doing this just for the heck of doing it, right? And I think somewhere in their mind, they had an idea of what they wanted to do with it. They probably had a business objective. They were consistent. Their strategy was cool. The storytelling was cool. Their format was even cooler. And, today they're selling so many more things, right? If you really look at it, they've got a cooktop, they've got, utensils to sell, they've got a spice kit, they've got tasty toys, they've gone into kids, right? Kids play with all these small toys. You guys will probably, know some kids who kind of do that. They've like gotten into food and flavors, and of course they've gotten into shoppable recipes, and they've kind of made something that was free to air, something that people are now willing to pay for, and that's the kind of franchise they've kind of built around it, right? So if you really look at it, they've got products, they've got merchandises, they've got tons of things to keep the audiences who are interested in recipes and cooking, and monetize those audiences. So that's what content does for you. It drives business. But nobody went, and Tasty was not, stupid enough to think, yaar, main 10 video, if I do, now I should sell my stovetop. So they built a large community, and it's extremely important because content helps you build large communities, right? And once you have a large community, once you have people biting into your content, you'll have them biting into your business as well. So a few other things that advertising has a campaign, content does not have a campaign, guys, please. So if you're planning like a content campaign, forget it. Content is for perpetuity. You keep doing it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it. Your advertising can get a content lift for a short time, right? But you can't be doing content for a campaign. Those who do that waste their money, right? And I discourage my clients from doing something like that, right? The other bit is, remember the body and remember the fit body and remember the investments, right? For similarly with content, it'll take you at least 18 months. And this is just a guesstimate number, right? It depends on how often I publish or whatever. But one day below 18 months, if you're expecting something from content, please don't do it. So understand that this is a long-term commitment, and this is not Google ad chalaya 4 din ke liye, danda aa gaya, nikal gaya. It is nothing like that, right? And as an agency, if tomorrow you decide to start your agency, you decide to do what you're doing, right? If you are, or you are on the other side of the table where you are seeing an agency and you kind of grow in your career and you've appointed an agency and someone comes and pitches you a campaign, it's very unlikely to happen, because I think 5 to 10 years, nobody will do something as stupid as that. But today, if somebody does that, then you know where the problem lies, and they're telling you up front that they aren't capable of creating good content. Okay, if you really look at it, I'll give you one of my favorite things that I talk to everybody, right? The word spam, the trash folder in an email box, is a tribute to marketers and advertising agencies who didn't know their elbow from another body part, right, as to what it meant to leverage a content opportunity. They just put big ads and they pushed it out. And it was terrible. They actually had a great opportunity to have good conversation. Instead, the word spam and trash is a tribute. Like I said, it's what they got. It's what companies thought of it. Companies like Google, email companies, all of them thought that's what it is. And that is something that you guys should not get into. So understand that, right? Understand what this is all about. When I look at some of so some people say कि यार ये content है क्या, what is it, right? I think content is like the universe. It keeps expanding in scope and in things that can happen. I think you will find Lego did a movie, right? And that's great content marketing. Nobody thought movies could be content marketing some time back, right? We have done IVR content for call centers and call-ins, and nobody thought that was content, right? But some of the more regular forms of content are newsletters, videos, case studies, how-to guides, testimonials, blogs. Blogs are a fantastic way to build content. Obviously, your website. Today we're talking about apps. Look at the Nike app, guys. The Nike app actually helps you. It helps you run. It has guided runs out there. It keeps a track of how much you've run. It does all of this. It spends time with you when you're running, whether you're wearing Nike or whether you're not wearing Nike. And it kind of makes it's so beautifully kind of tied in, right? The whole content on that app. So let's say you break your own record on that app, it will then tell you that the world is thinking about it while you're doing it. And that goes so well with the Nike tagline of just do it, right? So I'm saying those are some of the things that you would really do. And I'd urge you to look at content marketing examples. There's a great site called contentmarketinginstitute.com. Again, I think you should go there. I've got a few links towards the end, and maybe you guys can check with Anirudh and he can send that to you. So if you really look at content, there are 4 things. On the top left-hand quadrant is called entertain. The right-hand quadrant top is called inspire. The bottom right-hand quadrant is called convince. And the bottom left-hand quadrant is called educate. And what they've done very beautifully, this is the Smart Insights slide, right? They've done this thing really beautifully. They've put different content formats in place. So if I'm doing quizzes, if I'm doing branded videos, if I'm doing competitions, I'm clearly playing in the entertain zone, right? If I'm doing celebrity endorsements, if I'm doing reviews, if I'm doing community forums, what phone should I buy, right? And then you're going and you're checking and you're seeing a few places. Then you need content that inspires you, right? When I'm looking at education, right? I'm looking at infographics, I'm looking at guides, how-tos, ebooks. Those are the kind of things that I'm looking at, because that educates me, right? It tells me what I really need to do. So I'm planning to paint my house. And then, I therefore start looking for information. I want to know what are the right kind of colors. I have a small house. I want to make it look bigger. I have a big house. I've got children in my house. What kind of color does I've got pets. There are so many other things, right? And therefore, the kind of information that I need is a lot more educative, right? Convincing is a completely different set, right? It comes like right at the bottom of the funnel, right? And therefore, you're looking at interactive demos. You're looking at checklists. You're looking at calculators. How much EMI will I have to pay to buy the car, right? That's at that point in time that you're looking at that kind of content. Great chart, Smart Insights. Please look at it. And I think it will give you a good sense of how you should kind of use this content, right? I just thought I'll also spend a little time about, careers in content marketing, more so given the kind of audience I'm talking to. So, what should your content marketing team look like, right? And I'm just going through a few things that would be there. So typically there's a managing editor. This is the person who has spent, who has grown his or her way up, started writing, then became an editor, then managed a collective of writers and editors. And now today is the managing editor. They do a lot of things. They make sure that the content tone and the content tilt works really well. They are planners as much as they are content creators, but they're more content planners. They're not overall strategic planners, right? That's a little different, and that's another function altogether, right? And these guys come in, they brainstorm, they figure what kind of content do I need to kind of put out, and then they say this writer works best with it. They get that content, they check that content. They're the last checkpoint before content gets published. um, you then have community managers, you call them social media managers, you do whatever else that you want to do with them, but it's not only restricted to social media as Facebook and Instagram and Twitter or LinkedIn as you know it. It's also email databases. It's also, many other things that you're typically blind to. But essentially they're able to, the whole internet is about micro communities and communities, right? Whether they are format driven from a content point of view, or they're interest or passion driven from a consumer point of view. So I think that's another really interesting place to be in the content marketing industry. Um, there are analysts, strategists. These are people who look at how your content is doing. They kind of try and predict what kind of content you should put out. See, content is a strange animal. When you put 100 pieces of content, 30 pieces of content are going to rank at the bottom from 71 to 100. Right? So analysts keep looking at this. They try and tell you what content you should put out. They look at content that is there. They'll tell you time of the day. They'll tell you what format works better, which format works better on which platform. So many things that are there, right? And I think they really kind of do that. They make sure that the content which is there is kind of distributed right. They make sure that, they're optimizing the best that they can from content. So even the largest Hollywood studios, right? They need to go and promote their content. You look at the amount of promotion that the Indian films do. You look at how Amir Khan pushes out his movies. You look at how all the stars push their movies out, right? And I think that is extremely important. Analysts kind of help saying what works, what doesn't work, why you should do something, what time of the day you should do something, and things like that. It's an interesting area. It's a number crunching area as well, so I think you need to be comfortable with that. Clearly, content as formats. So this, I've not added video out here, but I'm just looking at design as well as video. Both of them are extremely important because they're another way to kind of communicate. I don't agree that text content is going to be completely overridden by video content or image content. But I do believe that each of these pieces of content play an important role, right? So design helps you create beautiful visual languages, which are really important, so that your brand doesn't look like one day it's doing something else, one day it's doing something else. It kind of unifies it. It gives it a nice, lovely touch. And I think that's what design does. Videos brings out the emotion in a very different way. Video helps you show and tell in greater detail, right? It helps you do a lot of that. So that's another part that you guys could potentially look at. There are curators, they work closely. So not every content needs to be created, right? I can write about 48 hours in New York without going to New York today, right? And these people therefore look at the web, they research, they fact check content, they do all of that, and then they kind of figure out how to bring that content to life on any other platform that they kind of want to do. So it's this is another interesting part, and another interesting career content niche that you could potentially look at. Contributors, these are freelancers, and they go across everything else, right? So you needn't necessarily be fully into it. You could do this part-time. You could look at a way to kind of get into it. You can vet your feet. You can say, hey, am I really ready for this? I mean, there are places like Fiverr. There are so many other places today where you could actually freelance for content. And, you obviously need to kind of work that, because if you send in a poor job, then you're never going to kind of get in there. But there's a large freelancer community. We're looking at a freelancer economy coming up very, very soon. With work from home happening more, there's even more chance of all of this happening, right? So contributors is another thing that you'd kind of have. SEO, extremely important, because they help in discoverability of content. So paid specialists, SEM, putting your content out in large publications, getting influencers to do your content, all of that is kind of important. These people wear multiple hats, a little bit of an analyst hat. They understand a little bit of technology. They have a basic understanding of content. So that plays a very, very big role in SEO and paid specialists. These are some jobs, right? And I'm just kind of, I went to the web and I tried to look at some jobs that are there. So You'll find a content strategy intern, and you'll find a lot of interns, right? The entire industry is looking for interns. In fact, we are looking for interns at Scatter. And if you do know any people, or if you guys are interested in interning with Scatter, send me an email. Just type in the subject as Sunday webinar, and I'll fast track the conversation for you internally. But I won't go beyond that for a plug. The content strategist. So, I'm just going to read this out, like, right. It says, do you geek out on turning data into knockout story concepts? Does shaping your clients' content program, managing complex content budgets, and blowing their goals out of the water get you motivated? Then you fit this thing, right? So content strategist is responsible for editorial and commercial execution, bring the client's perspective. They work with the clients, they work with managing directors, they work with the creative team. They're cross-functional in many, many ways, right? You've got customer success, which is more customer facing, right? And it's really important for them to make sure that the customer goals that are there are being driven by the content marketing team, right? So this is more like the client servicing piece. But in client servicing, you're only servicing. In customer success, you're driving that success for the business objective that you've kind of set. Interestingly, there's a big technology play in content marketing, much, much bigger than you guys are probably imagining. So today, when I look at a large number of organizations, including ours, we have a very big tech play. I'd like you to go and see, the role of technology in content marketing, and you will get a very good sense of what it is. So, software engineers, all of this, big opportunity for them to work in content marketing. And the moment you have that, you obviously have product managers, right? Because each of these technologies shape up into specific products. At Scatter, we have a person who manages our product. It's a team that we will grow, as we kind of get bigger. Internationally, you have large product teams who are kind of shaping the content tech. So content is really a service that gets delivered through products, right? And therefore, you find the entire range, right from creative down to product, down to engineering, all playing a role to make this happen. My last 3 minutes, I'm going to give you 2 cents, which is what I've got on this slide. Right? There's something called prosumers, okay? You'll find this in your group. And prosumers is a name I've given it. If you go to Google, it'll mean something else, okay? So, there are people who know which share to buy. There are people who know, which is the best wine to drink with what kind of food. There used to be this guy who used to work with me, right? Who knew everything about cars, everything. Like he knew the tire width of every car. He was insane. He had a massive dinky collection, all of that. And I used to network, so we used to also have a magazine called Overdrive, right? But people would go to the Overdrive content team and they would say, Konsa, which car should I buy? I'm planning these cars. They talk to them, but they would not complete the buying process till they met this guy. The funny thing is, this guy never drove a car or owned a car in his life. But he read so much about it. His interest level was so much about it, right? That he became like a prosumer. So he would say, bhai, tu ye gaadi khareed, right? And why you should buy this kind of a car. So prosumers are content consumers and not necessarily product consumers. And they really know so much more about that content, right? So if you create great content and you give it a little discoverability, prosumers will find your content, right? So they'll make sure that they'll find that content and they'll make that thing work for you. And you'll find these experts in everything that you've got, right? Whether it is a 10 rupee product or whether it's a $1 million product. There are people who tell you where are the best holidays to go to. They haven't gone everywhere, but they'll still tell you this is a great place to go to. And they know it because they've read about it and they've seen it. So creating great content works well for that community. The second point is, don't be different just for the heck of being different, right? Don't get under this different pressure. So I'll give you one example, right? If you look at Marvel Comics and Marvel Studios, right? They have got so many superheroes. Their story is not different at all. Their story is the same. Their story is about a superhero, a super fantastic villain. There's one love plot which is happening on the side. The superhero is a simple person, is transforms from a simple person to this superhero. The villain is going to destroy the whole world or universe, and 20 minutes before the movie ends, the superhero is almost going to die, and suddenly the superhero defeats that villain. And there are two ends to that. The villain either escapes, or and therefore sets you up for the next sequel so that you go and see it again, to see the same story again, right? Or the villain dies, and therefore an even more fantastic villain will happen later. So there's no different story. If you how many kinds of stories are there? You'll count it on your finger. Think about it. Read all the stories that are there, and you'll find that there's a certain repetitiveness. Look at news, you'll find a certain repetitiveness, right? Virat Kohli will hit 100. Virat Kohli will get 0. ISRO will launch a rocket. That rocket will flop. It will fail, or it will go up, and you'll create success. Right? There are all finite stories. There's a love story. There's a tragedy. There's a parent-son issue. There are like finite stories. There aren't too many of them. Right? I think the thing that Marvel does beautifully, it gives different uniforms. It has a different take, and the story is the same. Right? And they keep putting these stories out after stories out after stories out. And there's Black Panther, and there's some other man, and there's some other woman, and there's this and this that. And finally they build this mad franchise by just being so consistent, and so with it all the time. So don't kill yourself over difference, right? And which is why I made that point, saying that being different is important from a uniform point of view, and not necessarily the story point of view. The last point is, content marketing does not fail. The people who are running content marketing fails. The creator fails, right? The marketer fails. The consumer does not fail. The consumer just tells you created crap content, right? So content marketing doesn't fail. People will say, yaar, ye lamba hai, itna time lagega, ye lagega, wo lagega. Ha, there is absolutely no doubt about it. But the benefits that it brings you, the fact that, some of the biggest content marketers, does Red Bull advertise even once? Never. Never they do it. Why? Because they've built content, right? If the guy had to sit out there saying, ki yaar, main agar ye dalu, how many Red Bulls will sell? Finished. It would never kind of work, right? So I think content creators and marketers fail. Last bit is, there are three really good pieces of content that I'd like you to see. There's a webinar we did with one of the top shots in content marketing. His name is Robert Rose, and this is my last slide. Really, I'm going to stay on this slide, and I would urge you to read the second link, which is a 20-minute read, but it's a beautiful interview that we did with this gentleman called Joe Pulizzi a long time back, and it still rings as true today. Right, and the third is stages in content marketing, which I think could kind of help and benefit you.